The ICF Training and Technical Assistance Team is honored to welcome you to this California Housing and Community Development Workshop offered through the Emergency Solutions Grant Coronavirus Relief Consulting and Staffing Services contract. I'm Chris Pitcher from ICF, and I'll be hosting today's session. Today's training session is the final part of our landlord engagement, recruitment, and retention workshop series. Today we'll finish up with our landlord, I don't know why that's showing that, landlord marketing outreach and events session. I'm going to hand it to our first presenter today, and that will be Jean Field. Jean, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well on this Monday morning. We have a small group today, and which is fantastic because we want to make this pretty interactive. I see some familiar faces or names, and so I'm really happy to see everybody. What we were planning on doing today is we're going to do a little bit of introductions. We're going to give an overview of some things we've covered already very quickly about what is landlord engagement, what are some marketing basics. And then we're really going to get into talking about ideas, generating ideas about your community, how to market to them, whether that's events or other kinds of marketing materials. And we're going to have 3 different kinds of breakout discussions. We're going to talk about who your landlords are. Sometimes it's really helpful to just talk about that in a generative way, because you may start thinking about areas that you can recruit and reach to that you hadn't thought about before. How can you connect with those landlords? And we're going to have some free-form discussions about other kinds of marketing ideas that are working. We know that all of you have been doing some of this work, and we want to help give you some ideas after you've been through all of these trainings and give you a chance to talk to each other. So next slide. If we could do introductions, and we'll do names, pronouns if you wish, and your community. And also, if you could just start off today's session and this morning thinking about a time when you've been persuasive, when you persuaded somebody to do something, whether that's a landlord or maybe it's something in your personal life, when you've convinced somebody to change their mind, maybe convince someone to change their heart. You've led an effort and gotten other people behind you. So please think about that, and you can either shout it out loud or put it into chat. I'll share that the reason that I've been doing this, I did this was because I've been doing some canvassing and door-to-door outreach for a local political candidate who I've known for a number of years. But I haven't ever done this. This is maybe my 3rd time going door-to-door. And it's been a really great exercise in listening and talking to people about what they're interested in or concerned about, and trying to turn that and show them how this local political candidate is the best person to serve them. So that's why that's been on my mind lately. And I'm seeing some introductions, but I'm not seeing any examples. Leticia, I'm so glad to see you. I'm going to call you out. It's been a while. It's great to see you.
I'm thinking about it. Well, in a non-work related way that I was persuasive is I convinced my family that we needed to go to Maui this year for the family vacation. I laid out my argument. I found the place to stay. We locked in the dates in September, so I'm very excited about that.
That is exciting. Did you persuade them to pay as well?
I did, actually. So there you go. I mean, they're not covering my part, but it was like, all right, we figured out the cost breakdown for everyone. It's all good.
Wonderful. That's inspiring right there. Good. All right. Well, we'll let people take some time and think about something, but please do put those into chat. And we are going to be talking again, either in chat or in this group later on. So next slide. So I see some unfamiliar names, but I see a lot of familiar ones as well. So I just want to go over some of the basics of what does landlord engagement mean? What does marketing mean? And so when we're talking about landlord engagement, we're talking about as the cumulative efforts of market research, outreach and education, recruitment, getting incentives to them, really finding and expanding the opportunities for people experiencing homelessness. And so really finding those landlords who have an available resource and that are willing to, and convincing them and persuading them to rent to you and your client. And I think that those are the real basics, and it covers that entire spectrum of things, from just outreach, learning who those landlords are, through tracking unit availability and housing search assistance, and really finding out what landlords in your community want and need, and tailoring incentives, benefits, and services to make sure that they rent to your clients as well as they keep renting to your clients. You support them, you help them retain their clients, and the clients retain their apartment. And on the marketing side, I'm here in the Bay Area, and whenever I meet a new person, it seems like all they do is marketing. I ask them what their job is, and they say, I'm in marketing, I'm in tech marketing. And I'm always very curious about what that means. And it means so many different things. Like, all the jobs sound different. I can't believe they're the same title. But what we're really talking about when we're talking about marketing is we're talking about everything from finding landlords through social media or websites, to giving them a place to come and find out information about you through your social media and websites, going, door to door with door hangers and flyers, sending out email communications, having and holding community events, or going to community events and introducing yourself, really selling your program and your clients, doing surveys, providing all of that information to and gathering information from your landlords. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about marketing. Next slide. So I put some of the real just basic things that you would do when you're marketing to landlords. First of all, you want to know, who are your target landlords? Who are your landlords in general? And who are your target landlords? If you know somebody that maybe manages very high-end luxury vacation housing, that's a landlord, but it may not be your target landlord, right? So really distinguishing who are the folks that have the resource that you want and that you want to engage with. Then finding out how and where you can reach them. And we're going to talk a little bit about the how and the where, but also when we're talking about community events specifically, we want to know, what kind of associations do they belong to? Do they belong to any business or downtown associations, maybe through the faith community? There's a lot of different ways. So thinking about how you can reach them. Maybe it is an email or cold calling. Maybe that's how you reach people. But you can go through property owners and call all of them. That seems like a lot of effort for very little gain, but that's one way to reach people who own property, right? And then talking about connecting with those landlords, through an event, with information, with your marketing toolbox. We're going to talk about some of those marketing tools, and that's how you really connect. And communicating. Marketing, when I think about marketing in this sense, I'm really thinking about communicating. And communicating, as you know, is a two-way street. You're learning what the other person has to say, and then you're telling them things about your program or your needs that respond to what they've told you, and then listening to what they have to say and responding. It's a circle. It's not just handing somebody a flyer and walking away, or saying, do you rent, and walking away, right? It's learning about what kinds of things that they're doing. And then very importantly, you're collecting information to follow up and to start the circle again. So you want to know who those target landlords are. What are their needs? Maybe in your community, they have a very specific need for money to rehabilitate their buildings. You don't now have that type of money, say, but working with your system of care and identifying that as a need could help you grow your landlord market. If you're working with a philanthropic organization, And you can say, look, we don't have enough housing because we don't have enough housing that meets code. And our landlords have told us they need money to help us bring that up to meet our housing quality standards. So that's something that you can do to expand your landlord tool. But also collecting those information, that basics and of names, information, contact, we'll go through that later, because that's how you also keep track of that target audience. Next slide. So as I said, who's your landlord? Who rents to your clients now? Who are you not reaching? What do associations or groups do they belong to? And who knows how to reach them? Are they organized? And are there any hidden landlords? And what I mean by hidden landlords is maybe it's someone who, a senior who their family has all gone, but they have an extra unit in their apartment. They wouldn't call themselves a landlord even, right? But they do have an available property to rent. That's what I mean by a hidden landlord, somebody who wouldn't put themselves out there as a landlord. Are there landlord groups, places that you can reach out to? Is there a property management association, or is there, I guarantee if there's somebody who is very actively marketing themselves as a property manager, one of the things that they have done is really research the landlord community. So maybe connecting with them, even for those properties that they're not actively managing, could really bring you in some names and information about who's in your community. Apartment associations, and again, other kinds of community tax credit organizations, folks who may already be registered with certain kinds of low income or subsidized housing organizations may be out there as well. Next slide. And another part of knowing your landlord is understanding your housing stock and understanding your community's housing stock. So every community is different, right? And knowing what shapes your rental market is really important. A lot of our communities in California have seasonal rental markets, right? So in one part of the year, they may have a lot of demand for the rentals. Say it's you're a vacation spot or a beach spot, and they're only busy during the summer, right? Well, maybe that's not a great business model for them. So reaching out to some of them and saying, what about a year-round renter? What can I do for that? Understanding maybe their schools. During the pandemic, a lot of landlords who were renting to students really had a tough time because students weren't in person for part of that. So really understanding what some of those cycles of rentals are and trying to take advantage of that for your client. What is your housing stock? What class of homes do you have in your community? How big are the homes in your community? Some communities really have a lot of small houses, and that's just a fact. There aren't very many multi-bedroom houses in the community. Other communities have mainly large family houses, and not a lot of one bedrooms or studios. So understanding what your housing stock is and how you can position yourself to best take advantage of it. Are there a lot of spare rooms, garden apartments, converted garages that are fully up to code? What kind of housing stock do you have? I know a lot of our California communities have been really struggling with a lot of remodeling going on. So people taking existing housing stock that was intended for families, really putting a lot of money into it and making it a luxury vacation home. So understanding where that's happening, how and why is really important. And finding out where you can find out more. Like Erica's posted some information in the chat about places that you can find. I see some great things, and I think our next slide is discussion. So I'm going to start off. Latoya put something in the chat. Latoya, do you want to say that out loud for us?
Hi, hi everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about, okay, how else can I reach landlords? And then actually the landlord that is devoted to her church and who's connected me with her other landlord friends in her congregation, she was once my landlord for about 7 months when I was in a VCS, a homeless veteran program. So from there, we stayed connected. And then when I got the idea to, hey, why don't I go to churches. They want to help. Go post our flyers, go talk with the priest or whomever to organize an event, or, just let the congregation know, hey, we're looking for landlords, whoever here is a landlord and would like to help house the homeless. That's the plan I have in my head to get done. And in our organization, Interfaith Community Services, I just checked, went through our public drive, searched for churches, and found some good database lists of churches that we've worked with. So I'll be working through that long list now.
I love that. That's a really great outline of how to connect. Has anybody else done different things? And we'll talk more about that at the Community Connections as well. But what about other folks? What makes your community landlords unique, or where can you find them?
So I know our landlord relations specialist is on, and I have a 1-year-old in the background, sorry. But we're starting to pay landlords to hold units until we find a client for a tenant through coordinated entry systems. And we're learning a lot. We have funding set aside, and it's nice to have the flexible funds through the state funds to learn the process, learn what landlords are looking for. It's so different and new. And Julia's on, I don't know if she can talk on a little bit more. She's definitely working a lot on talking to the landlords to persuade them to continue to hold the unit because we have the funds. But it is hard because we've got all these clients with these HV new Section 8 vouchers, and then there's rapid, and then there's permanent supportive housing. So how do we come together to figure out who's a good match to this unit? But then there's clients who don't want to move to that area. So I guess I don't know if that's unique, but it's kind of trying to learn as we go. But I'm sure this whole process is always learning as we're going.
Morning, everyone. I'm the landlord relationship specialist. I work Leticia Anahosa is one of our lead people at our agency, and I could give you a few tips on where to locate some landlords. I think that I think the Chamber of Commerce is really a great networking place to start, because if you become an ambassador of your local chamber, the chamber has access to all new businesses opening and closing in your area. So then you go to their business, their after-hour events, and I know that the timing has to be approved and whatnot, but you bring your business cards, you network. And one valuable place you can start is when you network, see who's a part of other boards. A lot of the shakers and movers are on boards to hospitals, boards to like the local clinics, basketball league boards, little league boards, all kind of boards. Those people know a lot of people. And if you can kind of try to pull a couple of board members in, look, even credit unions have boards. And if you can start getting in those circles and generating your business card and pitching your mission, you may be able to run into some people who own more than one unit, or they know someone who owns more than one unit. But a lot of times, those events that happen with the chamber, sometimes they happen during work hours, sometimes they happen after work hours. And that is the area where you may have to get approval, the flexibility with your schedules. But it is definitely a great place to start.
Those are great suggestions. And sometimes they have snacks at those places too. So, how about anybody else? Where are your landlords, or where have you found a landlord?
I'd also see in the chat, Jean, there was a question posed about like, what do you do when you kind of woo and court a landlord to house somebody and the placement goes sideways, like something happens and it leaves a bad taste in the landlord's mouth? Like, how do you go about, I guess, repairing any of that like lost faith that happens?
Yeah, I think some folks, and chime in if this has worked with you, I think Leticia mentioned some, or that incentives, these new incentives can help with that, or a risk mitigation fund, because, so sorry it happened. Even if you can't apply it to that landlord, you can apply it to the next rental, some sort of bonus to that landlord or any landlord that has heard about that incident, right? Because I think Julia was saying they know each other. So if somebody has a bad experience, they'll probably tell other people. That's the hard reality. But thinking about how to give assurances that you're going to do everything you can possible to not have that happen again.
Yeah, the risk mitigation funding, having some funding set aside really helps just incentivize landlords. They do all talk. And so if something happens, they're going to know. Even like we work in a bi-county, and they know within the bi-county, because some landlords have units in both counties, and they're working with different agencies in both counties that we're working with other projects. So we've had, when we first started, we had an issue because we work in partnership with so many other agencies, and sometimes it's hard to really communicate, even though we have email, we have phone texting and everything, where a client was over income, but they were supposed to use a Section 8 voucher. It turns out they were over income because they started working more hours because of the pandemic. And Julie, I'm sure you remember this. This was a difficult one where the landlord thought, well, you told me this person was going to have a Section 8 voucher. Now they don't have a voucher. Well, Julie, I'm sure, had to explain the client has income now, and they will. So I had to work with the other rapid rehousing agency, because we had paired rapid with Section 8 to assist with case management and anything else the client would need. But at some point, client was working more hours and lost the voucher because they were over income. And so the rapid rehousing funds only assisted for a very short time. And Julia had to come in and talk to the landlord, assure them that the client would pay. I spoke with the rapid rehousing agency to make sure that they would provide case management to assist the client with budgeting. So it kind of like we all had to work together really to help this client move forward, and the landlord. I mean, I think the lease had already been signed, maybe, Julie, I don't remember, but it was already, we were moving forward with this landlord and the client. So it can get funny. You just have to really make sure that you're communicating with agencies and your tenant.
And then sometimes when to add to what Leticia is saying, sometimes we get really involved in trying to place our clients and advocate for the client and then satisfy the needs of the landlord. So when these situations arise, I would suggest taking a breather, step back, and really look at the whole situation. Because what I had to do to calm the landowner or property management company down was to pitch it this way. Well, this is really not a bad story. It's the actual story that we want to see happen. We need the client to get placed, And we need them to go to work and go to work to the point where they're making more money than me. And literally in this situation, that's what happened. And I had to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, hold on. This person was homeless 6 months ago or 90 days ago, but now they are working 3 jobs and have a home. That if there's a success story, that's the story we want to see happen each and every time, for them to get back up on their feet, become independent, start transitioning back into the regular community and function to where they're making more income than me. Your rent will, you know, just assured, we're going to verify that employment. And if he is employed at all these 3 places, hooray for like everyone. So once I pitched the story from that perspective, the landowner wasn't 100% happy because he wanted the government funds. But hey, the bottom line is the rent is paid.
Yeah.
So
That's a great way to turn it, right? Love that. And we've been seeing some great stuff in the chat too about really, Latoya's got a lot of ways out there to get some volunteers to stuff 1,000 envelopes with flyer and program information. That's fantastic. Sending out those envelopes and then following up, that's the key. And because you can send out those envelopes, but are you following up with in-person contact? Are you finding out about, well, hey, you haven't called me back because I sent you a flyer. What are you interested in? What questions did you have? What, you know, what can we do to get in touch with you person to person? I think Ty said that property management agents have been a good source to find units. Love that. And Erica was asking, has anybody used a real estate broker to help house people? Anybody? I think that's less common in some of our small communities, but it is something to, especially if you're connecting with people at some of those civic or faith-based community groups, asking what they can do to help. It's like, oh, are you a real estate agent? I think you could offer some help, right? They're great at marketing. They're great at finding out who's doing what with property in the community. I'm sure you can find a way to bring them in.
And Latoya also shared that she was reaching out to some veterans organizations. If you serve specific populations, that's also a really great way to get your foot in the door. Like if you're serving transition age youth, like where are those folks that are really, that's the population that they want to help and assist or be a part of. When you're able to do that, I know typically too, like families pull on the heartstrings for individuals, if that's a population that you're serving, especially around holidays, ways that you can really help to start to connect people back to the program. Like there are different groups that you can be a part of. We're going to talk in a couple of slides about just different community events, because last time we talked about hosting your own event, and we heard loud and clear from folks like we'd love to host our own event, but it's not our top priority. So what are natural ways that you can make sure that your name is known in the community because someone else is hosting the event and you just get to show up?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, you know, Erica and Julia talked about that too, is really hearing the concerns of the landlords, because the landlord that they were working with, you sold them on government money. You were like, government money's awesome. You're going to be getting this, it's guaranteed. And then when that went a little sideways, that was a disappointment. But the lesson there is sometimes landlords don't just want rent, right? They have a specific mindset, and really hearing that. Same, and you know, and really selling to that when you can, right? But listening very closely. And same with certain groups of people. Some people really feel strongly about helping young people because when they were young, somebody helped them, or feel very strongly about our veterans because the veterans have served us. So understanding and listening to where people are in terms of their compassion as well as their business, I think can really work well. And Jordan, we will have a recording of this, and thanks for coming. So Chris, maybe we'll put up the next slides and give a few few more slides, and then I want to continue this discussion because this is the heart of our program. We're really getting some great ideas here. And these are, again, we've reviewed these in some other ways, and we've heard from you about some of these, but how do you connect with landlords, flyers, even sending those flyers to people on your landlord list, right? Ads in local newspapers, community bulletin boards. You know, local newspapers, a lot of those are online now, right? So you may be able to find an online source of information that's not just Nextdoor or Instagram, but maybe a little local pop-up newspaper of interest. You could try to get an ad. Social media, always a big way to connect with people. And sometimes you don't need to even be paying for some of that. You can be taking pictures of your clients, posting on Instagram, Facebook, really connecting. Especially those of you in rural communities, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know Facebook really serves like a local newspaper in many ways when you're connecting with your neighbors and sharing things that are happening in the local area. Hosting a landlord event. We talked about this last time. We're going to go through a little bit. That's a high energy prospect. You have to put together an event, but a tiny little bit step down is attending events where landlords are likely to be and act like it's your own event. Maybe have a table. We'll talk about some of the ways that you can really use other events to connect with landlords. Cold calling, talked about the direct mail to real estate brokers and businesses. Attending fairs, community events, hosting a table, going on the radio. Podcast is the new radio, right? I think somebody put those in there. LaToya talked about getting what we would call earned media, getting on the radio or PBS network, a story about your efforts and clients. Really great stuff. Next slide.
And I was just going to share, I think the point that Jean brought up about earned media is really important. So when I ran my landlord engagement program, we did bought media. So we did media buys in both. It was in radio, it was in TV, it was in print. And we didn't find that buying the media had any sort of large increase as opposed to doing the actual earned, like they earn media in that like it's a story, there's a feel good element, you don't have to pay for it. Maybe you do a press release or a press event. And then we tried to track from landlords like, hey, how'd you hear about our program when we did our media buy? And like, it's amazing how quickly people can't remember how they heard about you. They're like, oh, I think I was watching Channel 8. And it's like, okay, we actually didn't do a media buy with Channel 8 or what those different things were. And we did find though, to what LaToya put in the chat, that more people said they heard about us on the radio. And now granted, this is a time when people commuted to work. So I don't know how different that is now. But the radio was a way that more folks heard about us as opposed to the television. And then the next big area that we heard was actually like our largest newspaper publication. We had an ad in the first half. It depends where you are in the newspaper, how likely folks are to actually see it. But those were our two ways. And we mainly heard from our mom and pop landlords through that. Our larger property management companies weren't jumping at the bit to be a part of it.
Great. And some of the, we've talked about some of our community events so far, but one of the things we do want to remind you of is, think about your community and what are some of the seasonal events that you have in your community, some of your community local customs. Those neighborhood fairs are really great places to connect with people, and they're very community and neighborhood specific. So these are just pretty much generic things that we've talked about. I think Julie had the great tips for the chambers of commerce and other businesses. Think about what's happening in your community and try to connect there. And also just wanted to put a little bit of a shout out for the organizational open house. And that can be a virtual open house too. Just really doing a little video, inviting people in virtually to your organization and putting that on Facebook or another Facebook Live, right? Next. And we've touched on this, and I think, but it's really worth thinking intentionally about who you're partnering with, and organizations and people. we call them community champions. They're the people that open the doors for you. They're the people that people come in to see because they know that something fun will or important will happen. Sometimes that's an elected official. You have the mayor or the head of the city council hosting something, or you publicize, you know, the mayor is going to be touring our facility on Facebook Live, watch it. And, you know, or the mayor is going to be at a certain neighborhood event at 2 p.m. to talk about our program. We'll be there too. So really partnering, you know, that depends on people like your mayor, I'm just going to say, but that's up for you to decide. But also there may be other, maybe it's a business owner, maybe it's a pastor at a church, maybe it's, you know, I don't know, a teacher at a school, somebody, a local person that people want to talk to and talk about, and especially landlords. Partner with other nonprofits, maybe 2 or 3 nonprofits can get together, and instead of having their own fundraiser or party, they could, you know, host a booth or something like that at a local community event, so they can be there together and create a little bit of excitement via a group. High profile landlords, and I think Latoya was talking about getting a landlord or two on the air, or having them act as spokespeople. That's a fantastic idea, because landlords typically will listen to other landlords, right? And so having them reach out and talk, this is what I've gotten from this program, and any questions from the landlord point of view. Erica is talking about colleges, universities in the areas. They can be good partners too, especially providing space for events, or maybe even partnering. I don't know. I know a lot of community college, there's business classes. There's probably some classes about how to buy real estate, how to be a landlord. See if you can partner with them, or at least leave your information and brochures about, if you're looking for, you know, if you're worried about getting stable tenants, here's a, you know, nonprofit program that can help you, or a government program that has these guaranteed rents. Next. So any other ideas that you haven't had in the chat in terms of where can you connect with landlords? There's been some great stuff. Alumni networks too, Erica, is also a great, sororities, fraternities, business organizations. Mm-hmm. Julie, it sounds like you have a lot of connections in the landlord community. Where's your most surprising one that you made, where you met a landlord?
Let me see. I actually have not thought about that question.
While you think about it, Julia, I could say, while you think about that, I was doing a presentation with a community that said that they would always get a table or a booth at their large like garden. There was like an annual garden convention in their town. And that was a great place, because most of the folks who show up to the garden convention were actually property owners. Now, whether or not they just owned the home that they lived in, or they actually were landlords, but that was a great way that they found to get the word out at an event that I wouldn't have naturally thought to, like, oh yeah, I should get a booth at the garden festival. But so I think sometimes it's also just getting, like, recognizing what our landlords value, which is making sure their properties have nice upkeep and that they keep consistent revenue or tenants in there, and where would they go at other events, that we can just be there as a reminder of, like, hey, you have other options for those different things.
We don't want you to give away any of your hidden secrets, but I can see by a couple of faces like, oh yeah, I've had some weird encounters, but I'm not going to share. That's fine.
Sometimes the reason why I say I haven't really thought about it, and I hadn't, which is good, this is good for me, is because, like, when I'm out places and I receive good service, I always try to double back, because normally it's somewhere that I've been before. So, you know, some of my obvious places are the chamber, churches, little league parks, and like social events in town. But like sometimes if I receive good service in a restaurant, I'll double back. I'll go back and leave a card that says, your service was outstanding, the Youngs, and then I just leave it and I put the server's name on there. So I do a lot of stuff like that to become connected with people. If they respond, like the next couple of times I come into the restaurant, then I engage them. Hey, you know, this is what you do, this is what I do. And that's kind of how I start to branch out, but I do it all the time. And so I think I don't know, like a social butterfly.
Well, I think that's such a great point, because for those of us for whom social networking does not come naturally, right? There are things you can do to get better at it. It must just come so naturally that you don't even think about it. But some of us have to learn step by step. So I'm going to remember that one for sure. I love it.
And I know we're talking about ways to connect with new landlords, but I think to the conversation we had earlier, keeping your existing landlords with you is just as important. Like that retention piece is huge. And I know one way some of my team members used to connect, it was such a small thing, but one of our landlords, we had our partnership agreement so they could get access to the risk mitigation fund and confirm they got the incentive payment and they had to sign it. And the landlord didn't like to use email and didn't fax. And so they physically would drive each of those paperwork over to our office, but they didn't want to pay for parking. And so one of my team members would like have them park at a fast food restaurant across the street. I would like run across the street and grab the paperwork and like chat with them for a few minutes and come back. And it was actually a pair of sisters, and like they had probably between the two of them like 10 units that kept coming through to us, and it was that small touch that they appreciated. I know that probably sounds really silly, but being willing to go that extra mile and like meet people where they are or what they want to do, like that was something that like kept them, like they would recruit fellow friends and send people our way because it was that personalized touch.
That's a really good point. Kind of meeting the landlords where they are too, because, and then Julia has said this in the past, they're almost like our clients. You know, we're working with different types of clients, and we've got our tenants who are experiencing homelessness, and we have landlords, and how do we meet them where they are? How do we make them, you know, happy? And sometimes it's a little bit, it's not a lot, like whatever you need, we'll get it to you. And we work with so many other agencies with these EHVs, and I'm just thinking we have another outreach staff that has a vehicle there through Kingsview Path. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Kingsview, but they also work with mental health and can take clients to their appointments and all, but they've gotten really into getting folks document ready with these vouchers because it's just working out for them. PSH is hard, right? Because they don't get so many of those vouchers, but they're on it with these Section 8 vouchers. And we've had, like recently, a few weeks ago, we had a property manager call us to connect with her because they had a unit available. Because this person she gets her clients housed, and she's relatable. She gets the money in, security deposits, the first month's rent, and they know her well. And she doesn't work with a lot because it's a lot of work, but she'll work with one, get them housed, work with the next client, get them housed. And so she's slowly getting to know some of the property managers. And so it was nice to get that call about an empty unit. And so we reached out to her as well. And it's just like those little things of the word gets out if landlords know, what you're doing. And sometimes I think some of them do have a heart, and a bigger heart for our population.
Great ideas. Erica, you want to go to the next section?
Yeah, let's do it. Chris, if you wouldn't mind pulling up to slide 12. And these are things that you've seen us talk about before, but it just doesn't hurt to bring it up. And I would also say, like, this is not an exhaustive list of ways to reach out to landlords. So if you've come up with other ways to, like, things like collateral or marketing that you hand out, throw it in the chat. But if you're not running a centralized landlord engagement program, if you're doing it individually because of rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, having just a brochure, and we're going to have some examples in the next upcoming slides, but that just outlines what your program is. And I would say, like, in language that's accessible to anybody. So folks who aren't in our field, who might not know what the PSH acronym is, who probably like look at you sideways when you say rapid rehousing because that doesn't make sense to them. But language that's going to get out there to landlords about, like, you're getting a bonus payment for signing a lease to someone who's unstably housed. You come up with the phrasing, but what that is in like a quick way that they could glance at it. And also I would say, make sure your contact information is on there, a way for them to reach out to you, and that it's going to either an email box or a phone number that somebody actually staffs and responds to. Because it's really, when you get those proactive folks who reach out, if they don't get a response within a business day, it starts to have people be like, oh, they're not as professional or they're not as interested. And you got to kind of like strike when the iron is hot. So like a program brochure, but also a specific fact sheet about your landlord engagement effort. And remember, like, that's your audience and your client, to what Julie was saying, is really your landlords. That's who you're trying to appeal to get on board with all of this. You could also have opportunities to share client success stories. And I always make sure that, like, this is done in a thoughtful way that isn't tokenizing or exploiting people. Make sure, like, it's a positive for everyone involved. But ways to talk about that, like, these placements have gone well and people are successful and thriving, and that you have permission to use those stories, that is helpful. Also, like, anytime you can get a quote or an actual, like, a photo op with a landlord or somebody from the landlord community to say, like, I participated in this program and it worked for me, that's even better, because landlords are going to be more likely to listen to their peers than realistically to us. Like, it helps to hear from folks in the field, but they really want to hear from other landlords. Like, what's the real, what's been your experience? How has this gone? If something went sideways in the housing placement, like, how did they respond? Does anybody pick up your phone calls when you reach out? Like, what does that look like? And then I would say, like, Julia mentioned this and others have too, like, get that business card out there. If you have a hotline, make sure that number is available to landlords. Just getting that, like, name and brand recognition, like you would with any sort of business or program. Like, when they think about, like, oh yeah, I want to help provide housing to somebody who's homeless, how do they think of your program? And that would be the first place that they could be like, oh yeah, I've heard good things about XYZ program. If, again, you could do this for your overall agency. And then I put on here a slide deck, meaning, like, if you get a chance to present at another event or at a community place, it was just really helpful to have, like, a short and sweet, what's your pitch? So, like, why would a landlord want to participate with you? What's in it for them? Like, how can they get connected? And what are next steps? Like, what's that call to action? Sometimes it's even as helpful as, like, we have 50 people enrolled in our program and we need to find, like, in particular, we need 1 and 2 bedroom units, but we also have some families. Like, make it concrete, because sometimes when it's that really open-ended, we just need anybody, like, you don't get a response because it doesn't resonate with the person that you're talking to. They don't see how they fit in it. Next slide, please. So this is an example that Jean pulled of, like, a marketing materials in Solano that really, and if you have your own examples, like, on your website of how you reach out to landlords, please throw those in the chat too. It's helpful to see. Like, ideally, you're looking for something that is simple, something that's attractive and gets the key points across. Landlords know what's in it for them, where they get the support. Like, if you have a specific dollar amount for your signing bonus, that's called out. If you have dedicated staff, like a housing specialist or a landlord engagement specialist, like, call that out, like, you have dedicated support. And you could see on this particular slide, like, they have on here a few different places what their contact email is, as well as their contact phone number, and then a few of the benefits that are included within this. Next slide, please. And then this is another slide. I apologize. This is probably, you probably have to like, I have to squint. So I'm assuming everybody's like, can you zoom in on what this looks like? You'll get a copy of the slide deck so you can see it. But this is just another example of like, calls it out. What's the landlord incentive program? What's available to it? How do you connect? It's short, sweet, and to the point. It doesn't have to be overly flashy. It just needs to communicate accurate information, and also in a way that like landlords understand the words. So like we stay out of our kind of shorthand and make sure it's clear to landlords for that. And then on our next slide, you'll see we gave you an example. Path LA has a specific landing page called leaseupla.org. I don't know, Jean, if you could throw that in the chat for folks, but you can go to that website and just see how they made it really clear and concise about here's how you connect. And it's not overly busy. Maybe not everybody likes the cartoonish graphics of the people, but I think they did that specifically so it didn't look like one type of person. But it's just really easy to navigate. It's clear what you're going to get from here. And if you don't, if you're not printing out collateral or doing mailing ads, at least having a clear landing page on your website that folks can understand. And also ideally that they don't have to do multiple clicks to connect to you. Like they find with web traffic, if you have to click through multiple pages, you're going to lose people each time they have to click. So if it's one scrolling page where they can see it, even if it's just at the top, it says landlords, they know where to go, they know where to find the information. And then, so those are kind of like our big things. I was going to say is there one more slide? No, it's not till the next section. So I guess with that, I mean, you've heard us kind of talk through for marketing and collateral, but I'd love to hear from folks on this particular meeting about what type of marketing has actually worked. Like when it comes to either a website, a handout, like what have you found that when you get it in a landlord's hands, you actually get a unit from it?
I'll even ask more simply, does everybody have a phone number or email that gets answered if you give that to landlords? Is there one person in your organization that answers those emails and knows how to answer?
Well, I will say it's really great to have Julia as a landlord relations specialist. It's still a fairly new position, and Julia has really grown, created this project, and we weren't using the funding for the landlord mitigation funds until she came on. Because for whatever reason, maybe we just didn't have a person to run the program. We had given out flyers to our agencies and provided a presentation and done some of the tabling, but having that person to run the project has really helped, and Julia has been incredible, and the funds are starting to be used, and then putting aside flex funds to hold units also has been pretty much all Julia.
I see Julianne saying that they had luck giving current landlords incentives to bring in another landlord. I think that's a great technique. I think people have been having some good success with that throughout California.
Can I ask, Julianne, what was the incentive that worked for landlords for that?
Yeah, and if you hear a lot of noise, I'm sorry, I'm in a unit that's being cleaned out right now, so there's a lot going on behind me. I'm actually from Washington, and I'm in California now, obviously, and we did a lot of events, landlord engagement events, and we held them at our public libraries because there was one in every city because we were a really large county. It was in Pierce County. And we would bring in a few landlords to speak. We would bring in a lawyer. We were going through COVID stuff, talking about evictions. We had a landlord liaison group up there that we invited to come and talk with people to answer questions about landlord-tenant relations and different laws and regulations, and we provided tenant information and education there as well. And so we would invite landlords to bring a friend, and we started out by doing goodie baskets, just bags full of different fun things for them to take home, and stuff with our company logo on it, things like that to remind them. And we did, I think it was a $250 incentive. If their friend decided to sign up, they both got an incentive. We used a couple different strategies. We did gift cards that we fundraised for, but as a nonprofit, trying to find those funds was kind of difficult. So we'd get kind of creative. Also taking them out to lunch to thank them, and offering, if they brought a friend, same thing, buy lunch for both of them and just chat with them about the housing market and their concerns and what was going on and things that they saw too, and bringing them in and kind of having them join as part of that procedure. I hope that explains it.
No, that's great. Thank you. That's really, it's just always interesting to hear what works, but like the idea of taking folks out to lunch too, that personalized touch, that can be really helpful. Like it is a small community, the landlord community, the housing community in general. So those sorts of things go a really long way.
And I can say that the events that we had, having lawyers and other landlords and people involved in landlord mitigation and things like that to answer questions, coming from professionals in those fields, made landlords feel a lot more comfortable because they could have questions legally, especially private landlords that we had that were just renting rooms, figuring out what was required of them by the county, whether they needed to sign up, if they had to claim that money for taxes. At one point, we had a tax expert come in and kind of explain how that equaled out and if that would mess up their taxes and what legally they were supposed to do. So trying to get that information as well and not just spiel all the good stuff. And we had bad stories as well, explained what could go wrong and how we were there to help, set their minds at ease because we weren't sugarcoating everything.
Right. And Julianne, for those other professionals, were they volunteers who came in, or did you have like folks on your staff who were able to fill the role of attorney, tax advisor?
No, these were all volunteers, and in Washington, we had a large homeless alliance that we were involved in, and Housing Authority was really involved in our COC, which was really helpful. Sorry, it's getting loud over here.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. But we were able to tap in. We'd let them know when we were having events and ask for volunteers. And it was only an hour, and we did them every 3 months. So we didn't ask a lot of their time, and we'd give them gift cards and baskets as well, just to thank them.
That's great. I know in my community, we didn't have lawyers attend, but we had one of our larger apartment associations attend, who, when folks asked questions, they were able to say, we talked to our lawyer and they said XYZ. So in lieu of having like legal representation present, that put a lot of folks' mind at ease. Like you do start to get some off the wall questions sometimes, or if you ask for folks to use alternative screening criteria for your program, sometimes that gets landlords concerned about fair housing and other things, and it's helpful to have someone in the room who's able to speak to those concerns.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's one of the things when we talk about education as a marketing tool. Landlords, have a lot of questions, and they may not be able to retain a tax specialist or attorney or anybody who has that expertise in housing, especially if this isn't their primary business. So being able to bring them that education sounds amazing. And it looks like there's some conversation in the chat about the LEAP program. Latoya, do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
She said she had to run to another meeting. I just got done reading her emails, but or her chat. But the LEAP program is focused in the city of San Diego. It's run through their public housing authority. It started out being specifically for veterans who are homeless, expanded to all populations. And so it's something that operates there, that's available as long as like the person's experiencing homelessness and you're willing to house them. The landlord's eligible for the bonus. They're eligible to be a part of, get the risk mitigation fund, other pieces. It's been operating for a while in San Diego. I can't remember the exact year, 2014, 2015, don't quote me on that. So it does have some name recognition, which is helpful, but as you know, it continues to grow, like more than 1,000 people a year go through that program. Like I think that follow-up piece, as you have to grow out your staffing, make sure things are consistent. It works with providers regardless of if they're in the city, as long as they sign up a lease with someone in the city, they're eligible for the program. And so it sounds like Latoya has been a bit of a bridge sometimes to help make sure landlords stay connected. And that's really a huge piece.
Great. Should we go on to our next slides? I think those are you too, Erica. Just a few.
They are. Yep. It's the Erica show for a minute, everybody. So going to our next one, if we could switch the viewing on that too, Chris, that'd be great. But so you've heard us talk a lot today, and I think folks like know this loud and clear. I know Latoya, Julia, everyone here is saying like when you actually interact with a landlord or have those opportunities to build a connection, it's really important for that follow-up piece. So to be able to get the names and the contact information, if you're at an event, if you're out and about, like what is that way that you could actually follow up proactively? Because the first time you talk with someone, they might not have a unit available. I mean, it really depends on if people's leases are gone, like what that looks like. But having that like chance to like persistently remind them that you are there. If you are doing an event or you have a table at a community event or whatever that may be, it's really helpful to plan ahead how you're going to follow up. I do find that like that's an area that can easily fall through the cracks in that like folks don't save time on their calendar to be like actually do the follow-up email or phone calls. But making sure that like they're as much as you can personalize it and individualize it, because folks might have questions. If you are doing an event too, it's always helpful to have like a sign-in sheet that like folks can quickly like put that in there. But I have found that like people's handwriting, it's sometimes hard to read after the fact. So if you have like staff who are working at the event who can look at that and just like confirm that they're reading it right and automatically input it into whatever electronic, like maybe you use an Excel sheet or maybe you use some sort of a database, that's really helpful. And that's also helpful if you could do it as close to real time in the event as possible, because then it's just less admin work that somebody has to do after the fact. But this is also a good way too to track like where is it worth it to spend your time? If you go to an event and like maybe 15 people come up to your booth, but there was only one landlord, was that worth having your team there for 4 hours? Maybe not. Or if you go to an event and you have 20 potential landlords come out of it, that might be more worth it. That was terrible English, excuse me there. But go like looking through and really tracking, like, is this the level of effort that we want to be putting into these different events and opportunities? And knowing it might not always just be a landlord to landlord point. It might be getting your name more recognized in the community. That's also important. Next slide, please. This is a little bit hard to see, but if you go to that Lease Up LA website that Jean put in the chat, there's on their page just a really quick place where they're like, are you a landlord? And you click it and it just takes them, or a property owner. We probably should throw out there that depending on your community, landlords are moving away from wanting to become landlords because they feel like that's a negative connotation and they want to be called either property owners, property managers. So also as you get further into marketing, be aware of what's the best lingo to use in that community. Some folks don't care. And then there's some groups that are feeling like really strongly about not being called a landlord. So you'll see Path LA opted to call them property owners. And it's just a real quick way that they enter in their contact information. And then it just does a data dump into their landlord engagement system. And this, I don't know what the back end is. It could easily just be Google Forms or like Microsoft Forms somewhere on the back end where it's automatically saved. And you then don't have to worry about somebody on your team manually entering it. And then this gives folks on their direct website a place to be able to submit that information. And this is in its own way passive marketing, because you don't have to actively do that. But then if you can direct folks to your website, it's all taken care of. So consider that. It might be a really easy way to like build that into your existing website for folks. And that'll save you all a lot of time from doing data entry, which is personally not my favorite thing in the world. Next slide. And then when you're looking at ways to collect the information to grow your network, we use the term database here, but realize that like databases in the biggest sense of the word, like an Excel sheet might be your database. It's something that you can hit Control F and find a name or find fields. Maybe you could sort by zip code or neighborhood, depending how you build that out. But here's just some recommendations of what might be helpful for you to keep tabs on, just to know what's in your existing market. And I would also say, we don't put this on here, but cross-reference that with where the folks are who are looking for housing actually want to live and what they need. Like, that's really important, that we're not just doing like landlord engagement and we're getting a bunch of units that then don't match the needs of the folks that we're trying to house. That doesn't work for anybody, because then those landlords are like, I thought you said there were people who needed housing. Why aren't we leasing up? And then the folks who want housing are like, why can't I find housing where I want to live? But things for you to have is the contact information for the landlords, how many units they have, what type of units. And really, when you get into that, like, what are the sizes of the units? Like, are they studios? Are they 1 bedrooms? Is it an accessory dwelling unit? Like, which are like those smaller kind of, they also call them like casitas or mother-in-law suites, just depending on like your community of what they are. What are things around that they have access to? Like, are they access to public transportation? And that could just be a field at the end that you track. It doesn't have to be your core information. I think contract rent, security deposit, contact information, address, like those are your big things that you want to keep track of. But it's also important too, like, what sort of options do they have for folks who might need ADA, like accessibility issues and things that they need to make sure they have access to, so that you know what's available. A great community to tap into are low-income housing tax credit or LIHTC community partners. Those are folks who have that government money to help keep their units affordable for a period of time. They're also typically not afraid of paperwork, because they have to do it a lot just to maintain those fundings. They do have turnover in the units, and often there's area median income brackets. So it's going to be more likely a better fit for our clients too, because like, it's really looking at typically 60% area median income or below, and sometimes there's different there. Sometimes they actually do have a homeless set aside that they might not be as well connected to your community. For that, they also will do it on specific populations. So you can dig around and really get to know that within there. Or also just calling out, like, if they're near schools, etc. And then you can, if you want to, you can keep track of, why are the landlords interested in your program? Like, are they specifically interested in working with folks who are veterans and wanting to house folks there? Is their number one priority payments, funds for repairs, etc.? And then an area, maybe not in this database, but that you need to pay attention to, or what are the questions that are coming out? And if you're getting the same type of questions over and over again, a good FAQ document is always helpful, or even posting them directly on your website, because if you're getting it more than 3 or 4 times, it's clearly a persistent question for the community, and you can kind of get ahead of that. But also, like, what are their concerns and how can you actually address those head on? And I think also acknowledging, we've talked a little bit about today about, like, not every housing placement is the perfect fit. And I always like to say, like, being a property manager or being a landlord is inherently a risky business. Like, there's somebody on paper and you are hoping that they're going to be a good fit for living in your apartment, your unit, your home, but you don't know until they're in there. Like, humans, were dynamic. And so landlords know that not every placement works out for them because they're in this business. But what are ways that this program is different? Because, like, the average tenant doesn't have somebody who's going to be involved to help connect them to a risk mitigation fund, or a case manager who's going to talk with the tenant about, like, hey, how can we help you get a little more stable? Like, do you need to get connected to other community supports? And so really talking about what your program is able to do, but not overpromising and under-delivering. I think that's the big thing. Like I try to never make landlords promises because there's always going to be something like outside the norm. Like you aren't always going to answer your phone if they call you at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. So like being really clear about your boundaries and where you can and can't support them. So those are that's the end of our like prepared materials. You'll see we got a bunch of resources that we've pulled together. I know we've thrown some in the chat, but we have them here on these slides. Resources from other communities. I have to say it's kind of nice. Landlord engagement now is like the topic du jour, where we're hearing it coming up more and more. When I first started being in this field, we were kind of like cobbling it together. I can remember like calling people all over the country who actually had a landlord program to be like, how are you doing it? And now we have like toolkits and you can Google it and it pops up in forms. And so there's a lot going on in this space. So we also welcome, like, if there are things that have been useful to you, share that with each other. This is meant to be a bit of a learning lab for all of us, like networking and peer support. But this is our actually last session together. So we really appreciate that everyone's been in this and like talking about what's working in your communities, what's not working, and sharing ideas. So with that, I guess we'll throw it to our last slide for like in our last moments together, any questions or thoughts that people want to talk about. And I would also say, I did say it's our last individual session, but if folks would like, or a large session, if folks would like individual conversations, like we are available as a team to talk with you about landlord engagement in your community and kind of dig in and go deeper there as well. So we can follow up after the fact.
Okay, Eric, I'm not hearing any. Shall we conclude? I got a thumbs up. All right. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon and this morning, depending on where you are at. Thank you, Erica and Jean, for that session. I want to thank all of you for attending this California Housing and Community Development Workshop session offered through the Emergency Solutions Grants, Coronavirus Relief Consulting and Staffing Services Contract. This concludes the Landlord Engagement Recruitment and Retention Workshop Series. Thanks.